Hello, everyone. And it is episode, I think 22. This is session 12. No, it's episode 20. Apologies. Um, we are very fortunate to have Doug Taylor with us today. And unfortunately, Doug's camera doesn't want to play with. So, what's going to happen is I'm going to switch my camera off, and today we're going to have a traditional podcast. So, welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Johan. I tell you, I'm not sure if this is maybe it's not a bad thing that my camera is not working. It is a bit early here in Indianapolis this morning, so maybe the audience doesn't want to see me at this time in the morning.
Yeah. So yeah, we haven't spoken for a while, and I think since our last conversation, a lot of things happened in your life. Um, Exciting stuff.
Yeah, a thing
Yeah.
or two. I gotten engaged, and we have a house that we've remodeled, and that literally just got finished within the last month. And so yeah, things are happening on my side of the world, and very exciting times.
Yeah. So I'm just laughing at your "it is remodeled" statement. It
you're,
never
you're
works that way.
you're never done, are you?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
got to the point where I'm tired of writing checks, and it's to the point where okay, we've gotten 98% of everything that we ever wanted to do accomplished. So I guess we're at a pause. I guess that's probably the better way of
yeah.
saying it. We're at a pause. So
My wife and I talk about the just as well policy. So whenever we do anything on the house, we start planning, and then we say, and while we're doing this, we can just as well.
oh yes, yes. I've had a similar conversation with my fiance as well. It's well, since we're already here, let's do this. And so, but yeah, we're at a good point, and I'm really pleased with the progress, and just
That looks stunning.
oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. It's very nice.
So just for the benefit of our audience, quickly tell us about yourself.
Oh, well,
Who's Doug Tedder?
yeah, and again, it's a pleasure to be with you today, Johan. I've been gosh, in IT now for longer than I care to remember, but service management now for nearly, oh my gosh, wow, 20 some years now.
Mm,
I'm an independent consultant, have my own business, a single shingle, if you will.
mhm,
And I do IT service management, enterprise service management consulting and training.
mm.
So that's primarily what I do. Occasionally, with all the things going on with the house, I haven't been blogging like I used to, but I'll get back on that here soon. And do a lot of speaking and just industry contribution. So
Mm.
that's what I do.
Yeah, and I met Doug with a very some project,
Yep.
and in the part of a book where I didn't know what to do, I looked around, and the only person that I could find that would be able to fill that gap was Doug. So thank you for that.
Oh, very kind of you to say, Johan. I very much appreciate that.
So, yeah, I think my ITIL foundation course was V1. That was late 90s. So I think we pretty much similar. I think I wrote the course was V1. I think I wrote the exam just after the exam changed.
Yeah.
Um, so that's about what 99ish.
Yeah, that's been a while. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so that actually gives one a very unique perspective of on how IT and enterprise service management has evolved. And they say hindsight is the perfect science, but I think it's good to look back from time to time. So I quite like the topic that you chose, rear view ITSM. I don't know if that's what you wanted to do. Um, what do you mean by rear view ITSM?
Yeah, great question. And I had this epiphany earlier this year, and shortly after you and I had first talked about me coming on the show here. And I see the same kinds of struggles, not just this year, but for the past years, with
Mm.
organizations implementing ITSM. And I characterized it as always looking in the rearview mirror when they're trying to do service management. Now, having said that, you're absolutely right, Johan. There is a lot of goodness that can come from looking back, understanding trends and understanding, the historical perspective of the use of technology. But the issue that I see over and over that we haven't seemed to overcome in many organizations is we don't take a forward-looking view of service management, and so we relegate service management to just managing those reactive activities that come with the use of technologies and supporting business
Mm.
outcomes, and so it's just one of those things, and it just is very perplexing to me.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. I mean, as I said, I mean, my first exposure to the books was V1,
Hmm.
and the longer we go ahead, we just see everybody doing the actually, in fact, the stuff that was in the V2 blue and red book,
Yes. Yeah.
um, and and it doesn't go beyond that.
It
Uh,
rarely does. I don't see it in the wild. And you're absolutely right. For all the good things that have come out with the later versions of ITIL, and but it no one seems to want to do it, much less does do it, and then they're frustrated with their results that they get from their significant investments,
yeah.
both in time, people, and technology, so I understand it, and we see yeah, I just continue to hear about this over and over, and in as I go through my journey with service management, it's just the frustration with, why aren't we working well together? Why aren't our colleagues outside of IT appreciative and understand what it is that we do? And and it comes back over and over that, well, we just talk about things that happened.
Mm.
We don't
Yeah.
talk about how we can contribute going forward, and so it's kind of self-fulfilling in that regard. You're right. For all the good things that has happened in the evolution of service management, we seem to be stuck back in the 90s.
Mm. So let me play devil's advocate. May it be because most organizations are struggling to actually get those fundamental things right first, or is it because it is comfortable, busy work?
Well, I the quick answer, my immediate reaction is yes and yes.
Mm.
It certainly is easier, and things are a lot more clear when you're looking in the rearview mirror,
Mm.
right? When you're looking backwards, and we just said it just a few minutes ago. Hindsight's 2020 is perfect
Mm.
vision,
Yeah.
but the issue with that is that it's in the past,
Mm.
and organizations are trying to move forward.
Yeah.
We got to build on our past, but organizations are trying to move forward. So there's the first yes answer.
Okay.
The second yes answer is you're absolutely right. And maybe this is a symptom of the times that we live in, or maybe we're a victim of our own good success, but we've become so accustomed to instant gratification, instant, don't make me think, um, and we don't get the fundamentals right. I always use the analogy of building a house, so it's kind of appropriate. We talked about the remodel, right?
Hmm.
And I always use the analogy of building a house where many organizations start their service management build by starting with the roof, and they don't get the fundamentals right.
Mm.
They'll do a couple things to grease the squeaky wheel, right? The
Hmm.
users that are calling and needing some help, and so they'll provide some kind of facility to resolve, or at least um, take,
Record.
yeah, record those kind of things. But then what? and,
Yeah.
and it seems to stall right there, right? Um, so Yeah, so it is yes and yes.
Okay, so let me. People get upset when I say this, but see if you agree.
Okay.
Um, to call something best practice, it must have been practiced for some while, and you must have proved that there's value in it. And that proof should be pretty broad across at least an industry. Is there anything wrong with the statement so far?
You know, I can't find any issue with that if in fact it is a best practice,
Okay.
right? It
Okay. So
should have had some proof, and it should be, to your point, it should be pretty self-evident that this
yeah.
is the way to go. Yeah.
Okay. So let me make the second part of the statement, and this is where people get up in arms. So, so it means it's old.
And that's an interesting observation, because on one hand, yeah, it was written some time ago and it's been revised periodically, and all quote unquote best practices go through this evolution, right? If I think about project management, it's gone through
Mm,
several evolutions. If I think about governance, it's gone through several evolutions. Service management, several evolutions, so on and so forth. And so, to the point, there is value in some of that because we've learned from our history. The
yeah.
the the issue is, did we really learn?
Mm.
Because we keep talking
Or
about, or yeah, okay.
so if you look at the 4 quadrants of the Kinevan model,
Yep.
um, only in one of those quadrants, in the obvious quadrant, is best practice and appropriate response. Um, so in complicated, the appropriate response um, is more analytical. Um, in the complex environment, it's more experimental,
Yep.
and in the chaos environment, it's it's more getting lucky than anything else. So I'm I'm beginning to wonder whether that stable, obvious environment in organizations aren't getting smaller and smaller, and others are getting bigger and bigger, and that's why we don't see the results with that's expected from best practice.
That's an interesting statement, and let's kind of expand on that just a bit more. The obvious things are becoming automated,
Yeah.
and so that's further removing or putting another layer of abstraction between, um what's happening and those that are monitoring those things that are happening. So that's a fair point. And I think the struggle, to your point, and Knevin does a great job with this, right? And if you think about, the volatility and uncertainty that we continue to run into, I mean, I think that's the way of the future, right? And we have
Yes.
to be willing to experiment and find the right path forward, which means that we're going to iterate a little bit, and that's absolutely a great thing to do. I would almost argue that approach can and should be considered a best practice, is to iterate and experiment and hypothesize and prove it. And this, the critical thinking skill is what I feel is often missing from a
Mm.
service management perspective,
Yeah.
because we expect, right, it's an incident and we can do this and it's over, or it's
Mm.
a change and we can do this and it's over. But the issue is that we haven't done the critical thinking to connect our activities from a service management perspective to expected outcomes. When we put together a strategy at an organizational level, right, we really don't know by far and large how we're going to get there.
Yes.
We just know that we want to get there, and we have, and as we iterate through the year, maybe we establish some very high and broad objectives and says, well, we want to increase X by Y in Z time frame, and and that becomes the guidepost, if you will. That becomes the direction we go. Do we know at the time that we put together strategy how we're going to get there? Absolutely not.
Probably not. Yeah.
And then typically then what an organization will do is they'll iterate and they'll hypothesize and brainstorm, and then when they finally get it into some level of focus, then you start to see some action. And the thing that is ignored from a service management perspective over and over is we don't think about that aspect of service management. So
Yeah.
the tools and the concepts are there. So when we're iterating, when we're experimenting, are we really developing our service portfolio? And I'll come back to Verism, right? Are we
Yeah.
looking at our management mesh
Yeah.
and seeing our capabilities and the environments in which we're going to live in, and our resources? No, very rarely do I see it.
Yeah.
But it's there. The constructs are there to allow an organization, or to facilitate, not even allow, facilitate an organization to iterate and figure out what it is that it wants to do, and at the same time take advantage of its existing resource and identify things that they may need because it's not in their current organizational portfolio. So the frustration or the observation that I have with that then is, because we don't do those things, it's suddenly, the organization becomes disjointed, when the organization becomes siloed. That impacts the technology organization, which is already siloed and disjointed, and we're just continuing to make the problem worse. So to your point, maybe the other quadrants are getting bigger because we have shrunk the obvious quadrant into something that is flip a switch and get it done.
Yeah. And things being obvious is dependent on the rate of change also. So the faster the change, the less easy it is to predefine things and keep on using it.
True.
So,
but
this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
Sorry, this brings us to a sort of a dilemma that, let's be honest, a lot of the IT service management consulting that's been done in the past was Control-C, Control-V.
Yep, you're absolutely right. It became, even though we said, right, even though we as an industry said, you want to adopt and adapt, what many consultants did is, well, this is what worked at my last place. I'll just copy and paste over here and tweak a couple of variables and change the white space to read your company name here, and then collected the check and left. Yeah.
And that's sort of symptomatic for me of that obvious domain, is the fact that, because it's stable, you could do things and it would most probably have worked. But at the moment you move above the line into that level of uncertainty, it requires different skills, I suppose. Yes,
I agree, and organizations. Again, let's be very candid here. You're right. Though that control-paced approach to some of the obvious things from a service management perspective will work initially, and next week your organization will change. It will. It'll do one of two things. It'll either evolve, it'll go out of business.
Yeah.
And we don't want the latter, but yet we won't embrace the former and find ways to facilitate and think about how it is we want to enable those outcomes, and what is it that we ought to be doing, so that we can start to move things from those uncertain domains into a more obvious domain, so
Yeah.
that we can get ready for the next wave of uncertainty, because it's constantly going on. And so we got to it just, the analogy of, we kind of have to, do a better job of lubricating the engine, so to speak, or greasing the wheels, or whatever analogy makes sense there. It becomes very clunky, and
Yeah.
and I personalize it from an IT perspective. We become a drag on the organization, because
Yeah.
we don't have our act together, and much less the organization hasn't quite figured out how to experiment and explore and iterate.
Yeah.
And so
Uh,
it cascades down, right?
yeah. No, I completely agree. Okay, so if that is the state, what is the solution?
I hate to be Pollyannish about this, but it just, the thing that we have preached for years about this is, we have to understand what our organization is trying to achieve, and help them understand. This is our role as IT. We have to help them understand a couple of things. One, how does technology enable those achievements,
Yeah.
right? Help the business articulate, and oh gosh, I said it and I didn't mean to say it. Help our colleagues that are outside of IT, right? Articulate how they would perceive success.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so there's that, and then we can start to construct things, to kind of help them along with the best use of technology. The second thing that we have to do is, as we get to know our organization better, we have to help them, our non-IT colleagues, understand what is possible.
Mm.
What is possible? How can we leverage technology? And there are rare folks out there that have that capability to do that kind of critical thinking and connect the dots, so to speak, and yet allow or facilitate. I keep wanting to use the word allow, but it really is facilitate that iteration and experimentation. Um, and then, as it gets closer to reality, as it gets closer to actually delivering those business outcomes, it's a smoother transition. It has to be a smoother transition, because we've been collaborating and working together and experimenting together, and we now know,
Mm.
right? We've turned the unknown unknowns into knowns,
Mhm.
and now we can manage those in a very repeatable kind of way. It's like we close off the funnel, and then we expect water to flow through.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Okay. So how much of the symptoms that we see in on the IT side of the things do you think is the result of traditional business thinking and education? And I want to include education because I still see many MBAs teach exactly the same stuff that I did 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, and that's interesting, because what that indicates to me is two things, right? Tried and true still kind of works in a lot of ways. The fundamentals are still the fundamentals, and we have to be very good at the fundamentals to give ourselves the space and the time to deal with these uncertainties. So there's part of it. Um, but the other side of things that seem to be missing, and it's just my perspective. I may be underqualified to comment on it, but again, those critical thinking skills, we've indoctrinated many of our leaders to not fail. You can't fail. You
Yeah.
can't you can't become. We talk about that we want to be learning organizations, but then we don't practice it.
Mm.
We want to be we want to continually improve, but we don't give ourselves time to do it. We want to improve the customer experience, but we don't understand the customer need, both internally and externally to the
Mm.
organization. And we're so hyper focused on speed to market, which is, again, that's a good thing. We want speed to, we want to be able to react quickly to changing market needs, but at the same time, we leave the basic things in the dust. and then becomes very frustrating. And IT becomes a microcosm, or at least a part of that. It flows downhill because IT acts the same way
Yeah.
and becomes a very
Yeah, and
convenient scapegoat.
but it's our own fault because we allowed customers to push us to deliver something that's not good. And
I
that's what I see over and over in organizations, especially if the guys are doing dev in-house.
Yeah,
Um, the
yeah,
amount of fixes that's sitting on a on a fix backlog um, in some organizations actually outweighs the positive work that they're doing to create new value for customers.
yes, yeah, yeah. There has to be, we want it to be easy, but we can't or don't seem to want to do the hard work to make it easy.
Yeah, I think you've just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, often I say to people, "Gee whiz, you guys must start doing problem management." And then they say, "But you don't understand. We're so busy solving incidents." And I go, "Ah."
That's exactly it. Or things aren't quite, well, and I can't argue with that because we're so busy putting out a fire and we can't see above the fray, and we continue to dig our hole deeper. And I'll come back to my back to my analogy here. We're looking in the rear view mirror all the time versus looking forward to see how we improve the how do we improve the path forward so that picture in the rear view mirror looks better. Right now that rear
Yeah,
view mirror looks pretty chaotic because things aren't going as well as they should, and we aren't producing quality results, and much less facilitating the things that our organizations are wanting from their investments in technology. And so it's becoming a vicious cycle. We put band-aids called different tools and applications on top of band-aids on top of the band-aids that didn't work to begin with, and never quite solved the core issue: collaboration and ensuring flow, and coming up with good approaches for dealing with uncertainty, and fostering that along into moving it from uncertainty to certainty. um,
yeah,
that's the cycle that we have to go through. We want everything to be certain by the time, but the organizations are separating or siloed themselves, and that just doesn't facilitate the good flow that organizations must have today.
yeah. It makes me think of um, when I can say little because I'm old now. There was a dubbed Italian uh, children's series on TV in South Africa, and I think the original was called Grishu the dragon or something like this. This was a little dragon whose heart's desire was to be a fireman. Um, and every time he got excited, he breathed fire, and he had his heart's desire to put out fires. And that sounds like IT to me.
Sometimes we do create our own issues, don't we?
Yeah.
Right, so we can come in and save the day. And we have these preconceived notions about our contributions, and not just our contributions, but how we don't have to interact with other folks, and how we don't have to take a more systems view. I mean, there are some things out there that are right, in my opinion. The way to think about things,
Mm.
taking systems views makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Using outcome-based thinking makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But we're
First principle thinking
yeah,
makes sense.
exactly, makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. But we seem to forget it.
Is it because it's so convenient to say, but ITIL says you must?
Oh, I hear that all the time, right? So the first thing I say when I say that, and I'm going to be very clear. I'm both an ITIL fan and an ITIL critic.
Mm,
Right, there are some things I think ITIL has done very well, continues
mm,
to do very well. There are some things that ITIL is historically weak, or and that's okay, you know. But when I hear that kind of talk, I ask them two questions. Well, one, have you read it? Right? It is
Yeah.
some, and I've said this for years. ITIL is some of the best advice that no one's ever read.
Yep.
And if they say, yes, I've read it, then I say, show me where it says, where it is stated in any of the text, you must do it this way.
Yes.
The closest I can get to that is understand the needs of your organization and adopt and adapt this practice to meet that need. That's the closest I can get to anything that I've ever read about ITIL. And so someone please correct me if there's somewhere in the books that say you must do it this way.
No, you're entirely correct.
Yep.
But it's just easier to use an authoritative source. I think sometimes to justify your point of view.
It is, right? It is. Or even worse, Johan, and you've run into this, I run into this, right? I heard someone else say, I didn't figure it out for myself. I heard someone else say.
Yeah.
Or had a bad experience at my last company because they didn't know what they were doing. And I hate to be so blunt, but it's true. They didn't think it through.
Yeah.
I'll give you a great example of where I think ITIL has some things right, and that's with that 4 dimensions model. And it very clearly says that many organizations, well, here's my takeaway from it. Many organizations think service management is just the information technology. So we implement the tool and we think we're done.
Yeah.
And we don't think about the other 3 dimensions. We don't think about our partners and suppliers. We don't think about people and organization, make sure we have the skills and competencies. And we take whatever workflow that is out of the box, and to your point, it'll work for a few weeks until the organization changes.
Yeah.
And then what?
Well, if you're not doing anything, it will be better than that.
Exactly.
But I also had people saying to me, we want to implement. So that's the first issue that turns my stomach, ITIL. And then I'd say, but why do you want to do that? He says, because we want to be best. And I smile, well, it may help you not to suck. And it's not going to make you best.
Yep.
That you have to do yourself. And that means hard work. And
yeah,
willingness to take risk.
And that's the thing that I come back to. It just strikes me where we somehow have thrown out critical thinking out of all of this.
Yeah. But once again, convenient. Yeah.
Very convenient.
If you have an authoritative source and you can blame the authoritative source and quote the authoritative source, even though the authoritative source is not understood, you will get away with it for a time, but you won't be sustainable long term.
Long term, right? I got in this conversation recently. I was leading. One of the things I really enjoy as part of what I do is I do enjoy delivering training. Because one, if you get the right kind of class or people in the class, they challenge. Right, they'll ask questions. They want to get beyond just the theory, and they want to ask questions. How have you used it? And it strikes me in that we're looking backwards at some of this stuff, and here's an example rather than looking forward, and really understanding how things are being done in organization or should be getting done in organization. We got into a conversation in one of my recent classes about the lack of knowledge flow within the organization. And one of the people in my class said, I think she was involved with the change management practice at that particular organization. And she says, I'm always running around chasing people down to get knowledge articles. And I asked her, I said, why are you chasing them? Well, how's it going to get done if I don't chase them? I said, so you go and you beg people to give you knowledge? And she said, yeah, essentially. And I said, that's not a process issue. That's a governance issue.
Yeah.
What is happening is it's a convenient excuse for not getting things done because we fail to govern our organizations and we fail to enforce policies that we thought were a good idea at the time. If the policy is no longer valid, then get into governance and change the policy. Why are we making people do things that clearly we're putting the burden on people that have no authority to resolve it, and they are trying to enforce policy that apparently there is no or little visible interest in doing. So it becomes convenient, to your point.
Yeah. But this whole governance thing is, if people see value in doing something, they will most probably do it. I don't know if you can. You also wrote an article for that Scopism the publication just after COVID-19. Yes,
I have. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember the article that I wrote. I was very critical of most governance initiatives, and my guess is that a good 80% of controls in organizations are useless. Because they either copy and paste it, or they had a really good reason for being implemented 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The world has moved on.
Yep.
And nobody's changed them. So is the problem enforcing governance, or is it that we've got too many stupid rules?
So yes and yes, right? I think you touched on there's several aspects here, and again, somebody's got to step back and look at these on a regular basis and understand the critical and think about it in a critical way. If it is obvious, right? If there's value in doing it, if it makes sense, if it's right, then we do it. Right? We absolutely will do it. The issue is, to your point, it's cut and paste. It wasn't built, that governance structure, and I'll come, and that flows down again back into service management. Wasn't built for our organization. It was copied and pasted from somewhere else. A good place to start. And likely many of those controls, to your point, are outdated and outmoded, so it doesn't make sense, so it's ignored. But to revise the governance structure of an organization is a significant undertaking.
Yes.
But and so we avoid it.
Yeah.
And then there's consequences. Ultimately, there'll be, it may not today, may not be tomorrow, but ultimately there'll be consequences for avoiding that. And then it's, we're stuck with some of the difficulties that result from not having those things in place. And then we have people that are running around begging people to share knowledge with them, or we've got silos and isolation within organizations, and frustration when we throw it over the proverbial wall and suddenly can't run our business because taking too many calls, putting out fires. And it's kind of a downward spiral, isn't it? I'm sounding gloom and doom today, Johan. I don't want to.
Maybe it's me doing that to you. So here's a tip that I give customers. Whenever you define a policy or any other form of control, start by defining or explaining why what you're doing is necessary.
Absolutely.
And the reason for that is the auditors will expect you to review all of your processes, procedures, and controls and all that stuff, policies and all that stuff annually. And the way that people do it is they read through the text and say, does this make sense? And they go, yep, that sounds logical. but nobody questions whether the reason for putting it in place is still valid. And if
I,
that is the first thing in the document, it
yeah,
will help you to make better decisions.
yes, yep. Yeah, I say the same thing. Policy has to answer the question why,
Yeah.
and it has to tell us what are the benefits. It also, I'm old school. I think policies should need to be short and answer three questions. Why?
Yes.
What are the benefits? What are the consequences if we don't?
Yeah.
And and what is the old saying? You can't control what you don't measure.
Mm-hmm.
Right there is your measures. Right there they are. Here are the
Mm.
benefits. Here are the consequences. And if we start seeing either of those things going in the wrong direction, then it's time to change the policy
Yeah.
or take other corrective actions within the organization. But because I rarely see, just nothing comes to the top of my head now, an organization measuring the outcomes from their following of policy. They talk about benefits, but okay, did they measure that out? Did they get those benefits, or are they suffering from those consequences? Either way, it's a good policy, right? If they're suffering,
Yeah.
well, then the policy is spot on, and we are suffering from not following our policy. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah. Now,
Um,
it's interesting that you use that quote of Drucker's that says, if you can't measure, you can't manage. Yeah.
right, that's right.
But what most people don't know or choose to forget is that he also said that, and if you don't measure, you don't care. Now, you can interpret that two ways. Um, you can be negative about it and say, okay, you should care about that, so therefore you must measure this. Or look at the things that people don't measure, so clearly they don't care about it. So why do you want to control it?
Yeah, and I think either statement is correct. If they don't care because it doesn't matter, they don't
Yeah,
need to control it,
yeah,
then that implies some actions to be taken in a certain direction, right? If they don't care because of other reasons, then okay, why did we have governance to begin with? If it's just going to be words on a paper, not enforced, then that says something also.
uh, so Mohammed says, why do people always see policy as a restriction or obstacle for them? It doesn't need to be.
It should be an
A, a,
enabler.
a policy can say, this is a really good thing that you should do. I think people start seeing it as a restriction or obstacle when it's pretty obvious that it doesn't matter,
Yes.
and yet you are forced to still do it.
Yes.
So I call that British standards. Okay, just abbreviate it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's what I tell folks when I'm working with folks is policy should be considered enabling, not restricting.
Yeah,
If policy is restricting, then you don't have a good policy. With some exception, right? I mean, there's some exception to that, but generally speaking, we should embrace policy as being enabling and and again
and question it if it's not enabling.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah, it's a cultural issue then. If we can't question it,
yeah,
then you have a cultural challenge within your
yeah.
organization. So
Because if you can't question it, you'll most probably lie about it.
of course,
And
yeah,
and the danger of lying is a much bigger risk than calling it BS. Okay. Incidentally, that's what I meant by British standards. I didn't mean British standards are bad. Um, I didn't want to say BS, but now I did.
yeah, yeah, like,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I message received though.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a quarter of our time left. So this is the problem. I think we understand the problem. Let's talk about what could be possible solutions, and let's be realistic about it. I mean, there's certain things that we can most probably do immediately, and there's others that's going to take time. So as we talk about solutions, just put it in context.
You know, again, I hate to sound so Pollyannish, but I get asked that question. Okay, so yeah, you're right. We're looking in the rearview mirror. We're looking in the past, and we're depending upon that by itself delivering some kind of value and some kind of forward-looking outcome. And again, there is some goodness that comes from looking in that rear view mirror if in fact we do it. But understanding what is critical to the organization is so critical for solving this problem, for solving this. And it is, maybe it's not fair, but it is what we need to do. And I call it get out of your seat, right? From an IT perspective, it can't be just leaders.
Yep.
You know, those senior managers that are interacting at the senior management layer. We've got to get out of our seats and get to know the business of the business.
Yeah.
I think that's critical. Really understand not only what the business is doing, you know, the business outside of IT is doing, but then look at it through the eye of how is technology enabling or getting in the way, or what technology is missing that could help those folks, our colleagues, you know, getting work done, right?
Yeah.
So there's the first one.
Okay. And that we can do immediately.
We can do right now.
Yeah.
We don't need
everybody can do that.
Anybody can do that.
Yeah.
Anybody can and should, right?
Cool.
So there's that. You know, I try to look for solutions that build upon things that we already know to kind of help.
Mm-hmm.
And I come back to most organizations will do a periodic review of impact of service loss, right? Business impact analysis.
Mm-hmm.
These things have been around for years.
Mm-hmm.
The result of a business impact analysis is that it identifies those vital business functions. When's the last time someone in IT looked at those and read it and understood how technology contributed to that?
Yeah.
That's a little work. However, then we start to see why it's important not only to look in the rearview mirror, but why it's also important to look ahead.
Yeah. And just, I need to say it because I'm with one of my customers busy doing that exactly at this moment, is if you want to get that stuff right, make sure that your business continuity and your IT continuity works and testable.
Yes, absolutely. It's unless you do those things, you've wasted your time doing the BIA, right? You wasted your time. And it's so critical, especially in today's world, that we have it right, that we are that rock solid on it, because for the very simple reason, I've said this for a few years now, I can't see the difference, or to say it better, I can't see where business process ends and technology begins. It is blurred. One is absolutely integrated with the other.
Yeah.
And
totally
so
agree.
they are almost one and the same. And so it makes absolute sense that we understand what those things that are absolutely critical. And then we can apply some of these things that we think we know how to do with respect to, you know, what are those business outcomes? How do we enable those business outcomes? How does and I got this conversation literally just yesterday. It's hard for our internal customers to articulate that. Well,
Yep.
so you still have to have the conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And the thing is that if we don't become the catalyst for that conversation, the conversation just won't be had.
Exactly.
Um, it actually makes me think of value stream mapping, or the value of value stream mapping. But
Yes.
then I mean true value stream mapping,
Yes.
from external customer request until request fulfillment or happiness or
Yes.
satisfaction.
Yes.
Um, I mean, think about it. How many of your customers actually had cross-functional people sitting in a room critically evaluating a customer journey in detail end to end?
To be very honest, um, none.
I've had two. Now, for me and you, who's been around for nearly 40 years, to come up with those figures, it tells a tale.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. It does. And it's sad. But at the end of the day, I mean, we'll do quote value stream mapping, but we'll do it for a department, maybe two.
Yeah, and that's not value stream mapping
Uh,
because it's not a value stream.
It's not a value
It's
stream.
it's looking at our process.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It's a workflow or a process or something, but it's not a value stream map.
Yeah.
And yeah, and there doesn't seem to be a willingness to iterate on it. And you got to start somewhere. I get that. Ideally, you start from outside in, but start somewhere and maybe start to build it out until you finally reach the outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very telling. All right,
Yeah.
you and I have been in the industry for a while, and if I can say no one has done that. And you have two that is very telling.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is those two examples aren't IT examples. It's examples where the organization embraced lean.
Yep. Wow.
So it was organizational driven. It wasn't IT driven.
And that's at least that's a positive, in my opinion, right? I mean, on one hand, you're absolutely right. If IT isn't the catalyst for this conversation, it won't happen. But it's also gratifying to hear that in your two examples, at least it was organizationally driven.
Yeah.
I, at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat from
Yeah.
an
That's true.
organization perspective, and we all have to float. And someone's got to be the catalyst, and I just see so many possibilities and so many opportunities for organizations slip right through
Yeah.
because they haven't they haven't taken the time to do that kind of critical thinking, and then they wonder why they lack agility, and they wonder why they lack just basic execution efficiency and those kinds of things. They're good in pockets,
Mm. So
but
here's the thing. Now that you say lack agility, there's actually one of the what do we call them? The rituals in agile slash scrum that events. What do we call them? Rituals, events. I don't know. Um, that gives IT the perfect opportunity to start having that conversation, and that's a sprint review.
yes, it's built
Um,
right in.
yeah.
The
So it's not about a demo. It's about getting feedback.
Yes, and it's right there. And ideally, and this is where I struggle a little bit with how some organizations have adapted not agile
Mm.
is, why is the product owner another IT person? Why isn't that a
Uh,
representative from the organization?
um, okay, so it shouldn't be. It must actually be a business rep. Okay, if the product manager is the voice of the business,
Hmm.
how can you be a voice of somebody who you don't understand?
Bingo.
Yeah. So
Totally agree.
I think it's a perversion of some of the popular agile methods that's not safe to use.
I agree. I agree. We our friend Rob England would call that theater, right?
So incidentally, in that the pun was intended in that statement. So did you get it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Try it again.
It's using agile methods that's not safe to use.
but yet we're supposed to be yes, yeah, but yet it's supposed to be safe, right?
Mm.
I yeah. Don't get me started on that one. Fundamentally, it's a great idea, but I'm not sure that, just like everything else, it becomes convenient because we look at and that's the authority, and we don't read it, and we don't embrace it, and we don't internalize it, and we're back to where we were.
Okay. Last thing that somebody in the business can do, and last thing that somebody in IT can do.
So the thing that comes to mind from someone outside of IT, what they can do is really start to apply those critical thinking skills. What is, or what are those outcomes that I'm getting from my use of technology? Really, don't accept from IT reporting that only reflects IT operational metrics. Don't accept them.
Okay.
That you cannot make business decisions based on rear view ITSM metrics like number of calls I took to the service desk, or
Okay.
number of changes that we processed in the last week. Those are IT metrics, and IT. I'm going to say it because I'm an IT guy. We're a little lazy, and if we can get away with reporting those kinds of things, that we will continue to do it.
And can I just add with that? That means don't accept an SLA that's got that nonsense in.
Absolutely.
And also, don't accept a service catalog from IT that is all about IT and not
Exactly.
about you, the business.
Yep. That I think we deserve that. We deserve that. We've gotten away with doing things because it was easy and convenient for us, and we suffer from that. And so if I'm outside of the IT organization and those are the kinds of things I'm seeing, don't accept them. How does that help me sell a widget? How does that help me deliver a customer experience? How does that help me enable revenues? Start talking to us in business terms. Don't accept anything less. So I think that's from the business side. On the
Okay.
IT side, I'm kind of inclined to go back to my earlier advice. Get off your chair and go out and learn your organization. Go out and watch what your organization is doing. Even have lunch with a colleague, or just observe what happens. Even if you can get half an hour or 45 minutes at a time, do it. Because we've got a relationship problem, right?
Yes.
We really do have a
And a
relationship
communication problem.
yeah,
There's so many
absolutely.
assumptions.
Yes.
It makes me think of the Chiano that said, go see, ask why, show respect.
Yes. That's so powerful. And when I've led those kinds of things, it is just transformational. Unfortunately, I've only gotten to do it at some small scales, but
Yeah.
when it happens, and uh, you go see, you ask why, you show respect, it is absolutely amazing. Because hello, IT people, your organization wants you to do that. They want you to understand.
Yeah. And I think something that connects to that, and the reason why I'm thinking about it now is because literally, when was it? Monday. I spoke to a bunch of people about the problem space and solution space. Um, going and seeing is not about what you can do. It's about understanding what the customer is doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
don't think of a solution. Yeah. Broaden your horizon. Yeah.
I, did you have a post on that? Because I think I read it. You talked
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
diverge, converge, diverge,
Yeah.
converge. Yes.
Yeah.
That
So I did
perfect.
it as a result of that session that I had with a bunch of people on Monday. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I read that.
Um,
It was perfect. It was spot on.
oh, cool, man. Now I promised the listeners that I won't do the same as what I did the first time around. So my first Get It conversation with David Cannon, which was nearly 3 hours, and apparently that's too long.
I can't understand. Well, one, it doesn't take David long to fill up 3 hours, but now
Anyway,
you and I could talk to David for hours on end and be
yeah.
completely enthralled and entertained. But anyway, no, just kidding, David.
So we've just hit the hour mark. So what's left for me to say is, Doug, once again, thanks for making time to share your awesome insights with our audience, and for being patient with me. I basically screwed up this interview 3 times. This is the fourth try. So apologies for that. I think the universe is getting back at Doug because his camera is not working today, just to even things out of it. Um, so if you want to get a hold of Doug, there's his contact detail. Remember, wherever you're watching this thing, the stream will be available afterwards. Um, and the YouTube, my YouTube channel is most probably the easiest place to find it. There's all Doug's contact detail. Is it all correct, Doug?
It's all correct. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you again. As always, Johan. It's always a pleasure.
You can say that again, brother. Okay, and then just remember, my books is still available, and please join me on Instagram. I'm new in Instagram, and I need people to come and join me. Um, so the Instagram feed is Agile Adapt. Um, I would really appreciate it if you can do that. And I forgot to update the last slide because we just spoke to Doug. Next week we're speaking to Gary Hardy, and then in 2 weeks' time with Richard de Kock. Thank you for listening, and goodbye. Not you.